Listen harder. There we go. Glad somebody got that. All right. Hey, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. I'm very excited too about the job thing that was just in there. Mainly because, what I want to talk about is really next gen in cyber, right? As far as the student space. Now, this is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. I've been working with students for a really long time, lots of different ages. I have two adult children now. One's 25, the other one's 22. So both are in that space of now having been through everything. My daughter graduated from the University of Arizona back in 2022 with a marketing degree, but now actually works for the same company I do, doing event logistics, and which is super fun because we're going to be flying off to Dubai next Saturday for a sales kickoff out there. And I was like, wow, that'll be fun, getting to do that kind of stuff with her. I did not get her the job. I just introduced her to folks in my marketing department from a mentoring standpoint. And then everything else kind of took over from there. And then one day I got the call from HR going, hey, you should have told us. And I was like, told you what? And they're like, well, they wanted to hire her, and like you're too close to what she would be doing. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? So it was fascinating in that space. And then every week on Wednesday nights, so unfortunately I won't be able to tonight because I'm here, I meet with 18 high school juniors. I've had some of them with me since they were seventh grade, walk them all the way through until they graduate high school, and then we'll see what happens after that. But there's a lot that's happening in here. And so I kind of put this together, gave this talk at Tech Tactics last year in Orlando, just talking about things I saw in there. But what I'm going to do here is just talk about why this matters so much to me, then talk about what students are asking, what I'm hearing from them, and then how we can make a difference. And some of that you may already be aware of, but should be fun. And feel free, pop questions the whole time. I love being interactive and all of that. I may walk around as well. We'll see what happens. But why this matters to me is really had its genesis in this story right here. What you're looking at right here is a lease agreement. So I mentioned that my daughter was at the University of Arizona. First year in the dorms, everything was handled by the university, no problem there. Second year, she realized I wouldn't want to be in the dorms. I'd like to be in the space and be out a little bit. And so we were looking at off-campus apartments. She found a little casitas off a couple streets up from the campus and everything was great, had a separate room, its own washer, its own attachment. All this stuff was great. And I said, great, send me the lease. I just want to see what the terms are. So I opened it up, and this was the first page. And the first page, everywhere you see one of these redacted lines, is somebody's information currently in the house, right? And it's really hard to read from the back of the room, but it's things like their driver's license number, their social security number, their passport information. And I'm going, I shouldn't be able to see any of this, right? And the guy just emailed me a copy of the lease. And I was like, what the heck is going on? Right? And so everyone's on display. Well, I asked him about it and I said, well, you can't have this. You're not supposed to send this out to other people. And he's like, well, I need it for background checks. And I said, well, great. You're supposed to be able to do a background check, but that's what you have a third party for. It also happens to be a violation of the Arizona state law that was done back in 2018. And the guy goes, literally, we had this conversation on the sidewalk, and he looks at me, he goes, well, my lawyer didn't tell me that this was a problem. And I was like, you need to get a new lawyer. Like, this is an issue, right? I wanted to do that, but unfortunately, that's also illegal in Arizona, so I couldn't do that. So needless to say, we didn't actually fill this part out, right? So my daughter did end up living in that casitas, but I was like, we're not giving you that information if you don't know how to handle it. So we did the background check a different way, right? And so all that. So it turned out to actually, in his case, not even be a problem because we never actually did this, right? They just wanted their money, right? So, but it got me thinking, like, what else is going on, right? And my daughter at the time, this didn't occur to her as a problem. She was all set to fill that page out. And I'm like, well, wait a second, right? We've got an issue here, right? People don't understand what's going on. So then we fast forward a little bit. I mentioned the high school juniors. So this was from one of their Instagram accounts one day, right? He's like, hey, Rob, it's an emergency. I need $50. Like, I'm in trouble, and can you send it, and can you help me? And I've known this kid for years. I'm like, wow, this seems really unusual. Like, if you were going to do that, you would just call me directly, right? And so realized his Instagram had been hacked. And the day I was giving this talk for Tech Tactics, this showed up as a text message, as if Taylor Swift was going to come wish me luck in the morning. I was like, you got to be kidding me. right? So this stuff happens all the time, right? And I'm sure some of you have had the same kind of stuff. Is anybody seeing those package spam text messages showing up pretty frequently now? Right? A lot of those. Yeah, it's just like this is getting worse and worse. So this is, I took just yesterday. This is from Information is Beautiful. I don't know if you guys are aware of this site or not. Some of you, like this is one of my favorite ones, and they have some really cool models on everything. But this is just recent data breaches and hacks. And the bigger the circle, the worse it is. What I love about this one is Facebook is actually up here twice. So they had a 420 million one and a 533 million one. Like, that's a lot of cat videos getting out there somewhere. So the problem I've always seen with students like my own children and the ones I talk to, it's this idea of implicit trust. They tend to think that the applications they deal with on a regular basis were designed with them in mind and that they do the right thing. So everything from I just got my check from my first job and I want to go while I'm driving home and use my phone to deposit that into the bank. Not thinking at all, is that even secure? Is the network work? Like, what am I exposing myself to? Or going and working all day from a Starbucks or any number of 100 other things. I go to an event and I'm at a concert. What's the first thing I do? I pull out my phone and I connect to the Wi-Fi for the event because I want to either live stream it or I want to post about it on Instagram or I want to Snapchat all my friends and show them where I'm at, all of that kind of stuff. And so they tend to trust it. They also tend to believe whatever they see. Right? And so we all know what's going on in the AI space now, where everything is subjective. And people are wondering, right, whether or not the information they have is valid. And you and I know in this space that we want to check everything first. We want to verify. But they've grown up in this world where they just take the first thing that they see, right? And the analogy I was using with my wife one day was I was like, okay, when was the last time you used a calculator and you got a result and you said, you know, I don't really trust that. I think I'm going to do the long division. Right? It's sort of the same idea with their devices. They just take it, right? Like I would never, like, of course it works, right? Not even thinking I might have fat fingered it. Yes, sir. I believe this one down here is 2018 and working up to today, but it will go further down. I just didn't scroll it all the way. So you can play around with it and filter it too by interesting categories. And so the coloring, it's really hard to say, but in the upper right, that colored circle is basically saying interesting ones, right? And you get to define what interesting means. But there's all sorts of ways to slice and dice this. But the point is that there's a lot of them that we're familiar with that we use all the time. I'm curious, how many of you have gotten like more than 5 of those little postcard notices in your mail telling you that there was a data breach? Yeah, yep. I just got one the other day from, I think it was the vendor that Hertz uses, right? I think it was them. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was Hertz, right? And their payment system. And I'm like, great. And I always love the fact that they want to sign you up for something that, and you're like, you couldn't handle my data right the first time, but you want me to sign up for another service. Just, yes, sir.
There's so many that you're aware they can stack the identity model so you get them free.
Now, see, that is smart.
And wait until the very last thing and then for one it's also an attack vector, but you got to set a fake one.
Right. See, and that's sort of happening in the supply chain too. I forget what they called it, but I saw this on X the other day that they were injecting stuff now into the supply chain so that people will pull them in and have it kind of execute underneath the scenes. Developers think it's safe because it's coming in from a known source and a known package and that kind of thing. It's like the amount of stuff that people come up with that is just insidious that I would never think of because I'm not wired that way. But yeah, it's insane. And of course, you get to the AI space, right? This is the whole other thing. We know it's game changers. We know that bad guys are using it too. But the thing I always worry about is the decision making. And is somebody checking the decisions that are going on underneath it, right? An LLM is only as good as the prompts that you use to put into it. So one of the things that we've been doing, so I work for HL Software. One of the things we'd like to do is capstone projects with Arizona State University. And I highly recommend them in where and I live in Southern California, so it makes it a little bit easier for me because they don't charge us anything for it. They're one of the few universities I've found where they believe that the experience of working with somebody is every bit as valuable to the students and get those interactions. And so they don't actually charge for the projects. So we submit, Usually work with graduate students in data sciences, and we've been having them looking at how we reduce false positives, how we can better do sources and syncs. So I'm in the AppSec space, things like that. And we've been working with a lot of them on, can we use LLMs for our fix recommendations and things like that. But the challenge is, are we able to validate what we spit out of that system? And you can see now that there are billions of them that are out there. There are all different metrics on these, and these are all just some. This also comes from Information is Beautiful. But the fun part about it, so I talk about the decision thing with this one. My son and I, about a month ago, for whatever reason, we were watching the King Kong versus Godzilla movie, right? And that was the newer one. And I don't know what possessed him to ask, but he wanted to know about King Kong versus Bob Ross. And so we went to Grok and we said, okay, what would it look like, Bob Ross versus King Kong? And I got this lovely picture of Bob Ross painting with King Kong sitting next to him. And you can't really tell, but he's using his paintbrush on his arm for some reason. And then my son said, okay, we'll show them fighting. And this is what it came back with, which is hilarious because I don't know what possessed it to put Bob Ross's face on a chimp's body. But then I asked, okay, well, okay, what he really wanted to know was who would win, right? Like this is even debatable. But the fact that Grok went through like a 3-page analysis on who would win in a fight between Bob Ross and King Kong, and broke it down, you know, talking about all of the strengths of King Kong. And then it got to Bob Ross and was like, well, maybe he could calm him with his soothing voice, or, you know, happy opportunities. And I think what was his catchphrase, like happy accidents, I think something like that, right? Or that he could turn his paintbrush into a weapon or put paint in the eye. And you're going like, of course, none of this would actually work in real. And so, but this is just one example to me of, okay, yes, we got all this great information, but can we do anything useful with it, right? But as students now go into this space and they start using all of these things, if they're not taught up front, hey, verify, and how to verify, and does it make sense, you know, we're just going to now start making mistakes faster, right? So that's a big part of it. So what are they actually asking, right? So I take this from about 4 times a year. I go out to Tempe and I do an application security workshop as part of the CHOPS program, which I'll talk about in a couple minutes. But I make it Harry Potter themed because it's on a Saturday and I figure it would be super fun for them. Try to make all these different scenarios that they have to go through. So we do some threat modeling, we do some scanning. I force them to have to make trade-off decisions between whether they would go or no go on a release based on vulnerabilities that they find. And my whole point of that is I want them to defend their answer. There's no right or wrong with it. I want them to actually be able to stand and say, this is why I would support that decision. And then invariably, it leads to some great discussions. And so some of these questions, you know, come out of those sessions. The one I get a lot is, what should I specialize in? And the reason they're asking is because of this, right? There's so many different career options and they're all thinking, well, what should I do? Like, where is the low-hanging fruit? And what you realize when you look at a list like this is like, well, yeah, nobody's going to cover all of that. But if you pick one now, do you limit yourself in the future, right? And so it's really about exposure. And I think for them, what I constantly tell them is build skill, right? Don't be so focused necessarily on the title, but the skill underneath it, and see if you can move that skill to something else, right? But we have this challenge. So if you're talking to folks in this space, this is heavy on their mind because they see all of these different job things that they're trying to apply to, and they're asking the question, should I, shouldn't I? Do I, don't I? Right? And it's all jumbled for them. So that's one problem. The one that's right after it is, okay, well, what certifications should I get? And I'm like, well, you tell me, right? I got this week. This is the 2024 version. So it's a guy named Paul Jeremy who puts this out on his site. There's actually a GitHub site for this as well. There's 147. This is, I mean, it's insane, right? And some of them span across, some of them, you know, cover one role, like some of them are just very minute. And if you're focused so much in on that, and you're saying, well, I need that for this job, and I got to, like, you can see where their heads start spinning, right? And so I'm talking more to them about, hey, again, broad base, right? Things like Security Plus, right? Look at CompTIA, O'Reilly, some of those things. But this is their world right now, and they're going, I don't know what to do, right? Where do I even start? This gets overwhelming really fast. And then, of course, how do I get that first job? And I can't tell you how many of them, and I know, and I appreciate that you guys were talking in the back here about the job stuff, but they're seeing stuff like this. This is a little bit dated, but these are still out there. I pulled this one off of LinkedIn, right? This is supposedly an entry-level position, okay? Yeah, right away somebody goes, ha, right? And the first thing it asks right in here, it says it prefers a BA degree with 12 years of relevant experience. 12 years, right? Or if you happen to have a master's, right, you'd think, okay, well, that takes you down to 10 years of relevant experience. Okay, just now we're into the decade, right? Or if you don't have either of those things, right? So for the non-degree people, 15 years of direct relevant experience can be substituted for a bachelor's degree, right? So that's just insane. Oh, and by the way, you have to be a citizen. They also prefer the CISSP, right? Right here. And I'm like, right, those of you who know what a CISSP is know you need 5 years of experience, right, at a minimum, but it's entry level, right? And so they see this problem all the time. I thought this guy summed it up really well, right? And he was, by the way, you might recognize that handle, my friend from Johnny, right? So replying to Tanya, but I love this. He goes, every time I see an entry level opening, I get excited. Then it says 5+ years excited, required, and it makes me a sad panda, right? So there's a lot of people that relate to this. And so folks like Tanya, like Alyssa Miller, like Naomi Buckwalter, handful of others are really trying to attack this space and say, look, we need true entry-level positions. We need to be able to create safe spaces for folks. Alyssa Miller has written an entire book on it, some manifestos. There's a handful of us in the space that are really passionate about trying to do something around this. And where it comes from me, how many of you guys have been through the DevOps days, right? Those years, right? Have gone through it. How many of you have a horrible war story, big failure, right? Okay, right? I nearly erased, I was working for PDA at the time, which they make finite element software. They were bought by MSC and then it became MSC software. But I nearly got rid of their entire code base in one day, right? Using ClearCase, trying to clear up disk space. And I did not realize that one of the directories was a mount point to the server. Yeah, rm-rf star, guys. Not a good idea. Yeah, exactly. I think you feel my pain. Thankfully, we had good backups. That's not how you want to test them. Oh, this was, oh my gosh, this was 1993. Yeah, so exactly. Yeah, but yeah, I remember, the lead guy comes into my office. He's a really nice guy too. He's like, did you happen to do anything? It's like this. Yeah. Yeah, it was not fun, right? But my point about that, and the reason I'm very excited that you're like, yes, I have several, right? Here's the thing. When we were cutting our teeth in this space, we had room to fail. That's how we learned. That's how we grew. And what's happening today and why these job descriptions are like this is because nobody is allowing anybody to fail. There's no safe space. So some schools have cyber ranges, some other, you have hackathons and these other things. But when it gets down to it, within the company, we can't fail at all. We have no room for it. And so we talk entry level, but we're saying entry level for cyber, but we want you to have a whole bunch of software experience so it feels like you know what you're doing. And so of course they get paralyzed, right? And that's why we have all these boot camps happening and all this other stuff. So that part is an issue, and it leaves me with folks feeling like this, right? So I think Beetlejuice fans in the house, right? This is Beetlejuice's famous response to when he was asked if he was going to be qualified. And he's like, I went to Harvard, I went to Juilliard, I lived through the plague, I had a pretty good time. I've seen The Exorcist 167 times and it keeps getting better, so on and so forth. Yes, sir.
A shortage that there's not really exist in the way that they're advertising.
Yeah, and I think that that's a problem too, where they're just trying to get people in the door, right? Like, or it's more, yes, there's a bunch of unfulfilled jobs, and I think that comes from a study that was done in 2021, where it was like 3.5 to 4.5 million, that kind of thing. And there may be some accuracy to the number of jobs, but the bigger concern is these places that say, hey, we can take you from ground zero to competent in 8 months. And you go through that and you pay a bunch of money and you come out with some little certificate for that, and then but no one will hire you, right? Because there's no demonstrated skill. One of the places I know that is doing it a little bit differently is a place called Techletics, and they're based in Tempe. They are essentially a boot camp firm, but they bring people in and they do 6-month internships and then a year internship and partner with organizations. And it's sort of like minor league baseball, if you want to look at it that way, or the off-season workouts for your favorite sports franchise, right? Where you draft somebody, you bring them in, and then you train them ahead of the real thing, right? And so that's what Techletics is doing, is they're working with that partnership saying, we need these skills, these folks, and we will hire them once they've completed this system, and we'll hire them into this job. So it's a nice partnership that way. And I think we need to see more of those kinds of models to deal with what you're talking about. And so that's where ASU as well came with the CHOPS thing, where they were saying, hey, we built this CERT program, and then I'll never forget it, right? There was like, if you've ever felt that imposter syndrome, right? Like, it was the CISO of McDonald's, like big McDonald's, couple of DoD guys who had retired, a few other big names, and me. And I'm going, why am I here? Like, I'm just an AppSec guy. And we were putting this whole CERT program together and trying to say, okay, what are the things that students should be at least exposed to in a 9-week period to at least give them a chance, right? And it was things like being an analyst, understanding GRC, the basics of that, endpoint management. And then I was like, hey, application security should have a seat at the table, because everybody uses apps and they're all going to run across them. And so we put all this stuff in, we lay it all out, and we did what everybody does, right? Beautiful calendar, lovely spreadsheet, have it all linking in. And one of the folks from ASU goes, okay, if a student goes through this and your company has an opening, would you hire them? And I'm sitting there, and that's when, you ever seen that meme, right, with the popcorn and everything? I just sat back and I'm like, oh, this is going to be good, right? And sure enough, it went silent. And then finally, the McDonald's guy pops up, right, Sean, and he goes, no, I don't think I would, actually. And here's why, right? They would still need this, and this. And so ASU came and said, well, then we need to redesign the program, because the whole point was to get people hired, right? So you had a question.
AI and machine learning,
Uh-huh.
how companies, and I will say medium-sized companies, because some of the big ones and the government use Palantir and all those sophisticated systems to leverage artificial intelligence, is there for them to the best probably possible. But how about the small businesses, the medium-sized companies, education entities like ISDs also are leveraging AI and machine learning technology to identify how they're going to be balancing how much personnel they will need versus how much they're going to automate technology for security?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that I've got a great feel for it from the HR side on that. I do think that companies are trying to walk that balance of what can be done in an automated fashion versus what do we need somebody to actually have eyes on it for, right? And I think we're still very early in that space. There seems to be in places like education and the smaller companies, there seems to be a little bit more of a hesitancy to say, I'm going to use it for well-known use cases, right? So predicting customer outcomes or helping students decide classes, graduate programs, those kinds of things, what I would call the low-hanging fruit. So I could see a university replacing some low-level guidance counseling with AI to do some decision-making. If a student comes in and says, I have I've taken these classes in high school and I've done these kinds of internships and this is the degree program I'm interested in. What would be the best path for me, right? Like those kinds of things. But generally speaking, I think they're still trying to figure it out. Some of it too, I think is what systems are you actually allowed to be connected to? And what are the LLMs underneath those? So there is still a lot of people trying to figure out, well, do I do, discrete? Do I go generative? Do I, do I even understand the difference? Like all of those kinds of things. So there's a thing called the Burbio School Tracker that I get a weekly newsletter on that goes out and talks about funding for a lot of the different projects that are happening for education across the country. And so you're starting to see a little more of those projects popping up. But generally speaking, I think this is still in its infancy when it comes to how AI is going to hit that space. They're much more concerned with students using AI to plagiarize more than, things like that, than they are anything else. Yes, sir.
Yeah, one of the concerns with small and medium businesses is they can't afford a staff of,
Oh my
10 to
gosh.
15
Yeah,
people
exactly.
and don't have the resources. So if you're going to fix that problem, you probably need to be looking at contract support.
Mhm.
And a company you trust that has, I mean, there's the, fractional CISO, and there's other
The
technical folks
VCISO.
that you can bring to the table,
Yeah.
and actually have a cogent plan. But to deploy AI in a company with no IT
Oh,
infrastructure
yeah, no, that's a
is a
disaster.
nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll have all sorts of fun you don't want. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so introduce myself. I'm Matt. I'm a leader of one of the cyber clubs here at Austin Community College. And so my question to you is, as you're pointing out, right, what we're seeing in the industry is that students are struggling to get into the industry,
Mhm.
right, especially cybersecurity. And my only question is, what do students and people need to be doing so that they stand out to employers and basically go on the process of getting hired potentially or getting that interview?
Right. I think the biggest single thing, and what I tell my own kids all the time, skills and network. Like skills and network, skills and network. And the reason I say that is because we often isolate ourselves down. So like you say, I'm in a cyber club, right? And we want to get that job. We think that we only need to talk to other cyber people to find that. And what we don't necessarily realize is our next door neighbor who has a kid who plays soccer with my kid may know somebody on his kid's team who's in cyber, and you get connected that way, right? And so I tell them, don't underestimate the people that you know. Like, let people know that you're interested first and foremost. Let people know what you're looking for. You may run into somebody at church, right? Or in a restaurant or things like that. So that's one thing. The other thing is put yourself out there. So go to the hackathons or pop into a conference that's got a student rate. Come to a meetup, things like that. But it's the challenge. Yeah, go to LASCON, right? The challenge that's so difficult in this is if you're just applying to things, right? And I don't know how many other you guys know in your organizations. The dirty little secret in mine is that we often put the job posting out there as a legal requirement, right? People have to do that. But I don't know about you, and I can't prove it, and I don't know for sure, but it sure feels like it when I talk to people, that the first thing when we're looking to hire somebody, we go and we ask the people in our organization, do you know anyone? You get those internal lists, right? And say, hey, we have these openings. And then what I'll do, because I work for an Indian-owned company, is I'll take the job listing and I'll go and say, well, can I find it, right? I'll go into our system and like, where is it? And sometimes it's in a different system, right? And it's a job that would be perfect for somebody I know, but it's in Noida, which is in northern India, which isn't going to work very well if you live in Southern California, right? So it's like little things like that, but they exhaust everything internally. And then when we don't find someone internal, then we go external, right? And so if you know people and it's somebody like me, right? And then I get that message and I go, oh, that would fit this guy who I met, at a boot camp, or I met at ASU's workshop, or I know from this other thing who happens to be interested. Now I can make that referral for them. So, yes, sir. I'll come to you.
Going back to the job posting stuff, I've personally gotten 2 jobs where they wanted me, but they had to post it, and they made the job listing
Yeah,
so detailed
right.
it was only me.
Exactly.
And
Which is
it's
great
like,
for you.
because they have to post it.
Exactly.
But when I see the ones like you were giving, 12 years of experience and all this stuff, entry level,
Yeah.
but one is a lot of times it's the HR people that they don't understand the job. So they just
Not at all.
pull a listing they think might have applied and stick that in there and then just change the detail of
Yep.
how much experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like they're just posting this stuff because they need to.
I would say Indeed, but that's a whole side joke there for those that got it. I know you had your hand up, and then I'll come to you, sir.
Sure. So this isn't so much a question. My name is David Seaholm. So experience in this realm, when you are applying for jobs, your resume is going into, now it's going into a large language model looking for keyword distinctions. And so if you don't pass that, you're never even going to get to talk to anybody. Right. And that's what you're looking for, is you're looking to be able to get to talk to a person, to be able to have that emotional appeal and be able to show that hey, you're a person, you can learn, and maybe you don't know everything right now, but you're more than willing to get there. And what they're discussing is how to get to that conversation. And so even if you don't know anybody at the company, if you go to apply for a job, you need to be reaching out to anybody that you can find on LinkedIn that has recruiter in their title, anybody that looks like they might be in above that department, and send them a message and say, hey, I'm here. I applied for the job. I'm a real person, by the way, because we're getting tons of fake applications in as well. So getting that conversation going and talking about security, put your social engineering hat on. Use LinkedIn and make that emotional appeal of saying, hey, let's use LinkedIn for what it's for and connect, and get those people to actually respond to you. So, yeah.
In the back.
Yeah, we've kind of drifted a little bit, but this is more of an observation than it is a question. But getting back to your ASU talk and the McDonald's guy who said, after 9 months, would I hire this guy? No. Seems to me the fundamental problem is information security is not an entry-level job. Most of the people I know that are decent and good and very expert in information security were former system admins or former chief programmers or former architects or whatever. And they already have the knowledge that's implicit in all of those job descriptions that you listed. We went through that application and it listed all of these things that you have to have. Well, those are the things you get by being a system admin or something else. And then you become an information security specialist. It's just an observation.
Yeah, no, and it's a really good one. I'm going to come to you. It reminds me, so one of my good friends is a guy named Matt Kraus. Matt used to be the CISO for Taco Bell, and now he's with John Deere. But I didn't know he was a CISO until his son Noah was probably about 12 in junior high. And he and his son and my son grew up together and were best friends since like kindergarten. But we just happened to be talking one day, and he said something that I was like, you know about this? And so one thing led to another, and like, oh, you're a CISO, and I'm an AppSec vendor, and like, okay, now I'm not going to try to sell you anything because you're my friend, right? And I make that very clear. I've never tried to sell Matt anything, but one of the things he told me about this space, and we had him, I do a podcast called Application Paranoia with a couple other guys. We had Matt on as a guest one time, and I'll never forget what he was saying about this space. He said, when we were becoming into CISOs, we made it up as we went along for just that reason that you were talking about. Like, they had the system administrative skill, they had the networking, they had the experience. So we just kind of blazed a trail, but we never left any breadcrumbs behind. And so that's kind of how we've gotten here, right? Like, there is no career path to CISO that's well defined right now. And you're right, there is a baseline that is really difficult, that isn't being taught very well in universities, or that is kind of elective for certain majors. It's only mandatory for a few, those kinds of things. So it does get really difficult. So I appreciate that observation, or what I would say a observation, but you made it, so it's yours.
So I guess I'm
Sorry.
gonna build back on the observations, but tying to
Yeah.
what the gentleman from McDonald's kind of echoed, but and I almost thought you were gonna go there with a perspective from someone like McDonald's. But you said something very early in the beginning of your presentation
Uh-huh.
about, making sure that when we saw that slide with all those different titles and such on there, is like going for breadth,
Yeah.
exposure. Point in context, I have a small firm, 150 some odd people. I have hired in 3 years, 1 security person.
Hmm.
I hire about 10 IT or application developers every 6 months. Every one of my security staff have come in from those others. They were a great help desk. They were a great analyst or system admin. Going for that breadth, the fact that you want to go into cyber and that's something you are passionate about now, great. But from a business owner's perspective, I have to make money and revenue delivering my product and delivering my value. I'm going to groom up and promote up and pull within my talent from phones that come in that help my business.
Right.
And those are your entry points: IT, support, system administration, application development. Heck, one of the guys I'm grooming right now is a product manager that has become my most successful LLM person because he just was inquisitive and started asking questions.
Such a good point.
So, I mean, myself, I told a few others before, I'm a librarian by trade. I barely
Like book
knew-
librarian or
Yeah,
code
well, I
lib-
was trained when books were on
Oh, okay.
shelves and card cataloging.
Did you know Dewey
yeah.
personally? No, just kidding.
We could go for hours. But that is the most, like, when I hear that takeaway and just to resonate back, it's
Yeah.
go where that, go for breadth, go for where the value of the business is. And the fact that you have interest in that within the first 3 months somewhere, make a friend,
Yeah.
volunteer,
Yeah.
go to their pieces. And I can tell you, within 8 months, you'll be on a track, maybe in security or something else you had no idea that you
Well,
wanted.
yeah. And those titles are all going to change.
Yeah. And this applies. I've worked in Fortune 500 and I've worked for small companies. But that's been my most successful path for developing my teams and my staff.
Cool. Good.
Not me, but there was a hand up Zoom, Chris.
Oh. Thank you for putting that, because I all I can see is this one. Did anybody on Zoom want to unmute and ask, or do I need to unmute something?
I had raised my hand. No, I was just kind of going back to the comment the gentleman made about, people getting the experience by doing the jobs. I mean, I definitely think that that's something that, in the past, that's absolutely the way it's worked. But I think the problem we have there is that you can't always guarantee that people with those jobs are going to, be interested in security. And we have such a deficit in our industry that we have to start looking at other ways to get that training and that education earlier on without them having to be in those roles first, because we can't afford to have that be our only pool to pull potential employees from,
Right.
in my opinion.
Oh, you're spot on. You're spot on. Like, there's a lot of those places that are building programs or looking across, different disciplines, to your point about unexpected areas to try to bring in.
So what I would recommend and what I did is I got in at basically just a regular internet company, and then I moved into a company that was doing cloud services. And then as I started working at those other companies, they had partnerships with multiple different other vendors, and you can get free training through them and certifications. I have 27 certifications now, because what I did is all you have to do is use your email. And then you can just put your email in there, and then you get into the vendor portal and you can take the certifications, which is great. There's all kinds of other ones. If you're not working for a company that you can get certifications in different areas that you have interest in. So, I mean, obviously you can get cloud certifications for Google, AWS, or Azure, or any of those type of things. There's all kinds of AI certifications floating around that are really good that you guys can learn. And then once you do that and you put those certifications in there, in the bottom of it, it'll say add the skill. And then that's how they're going to find you with the keyword search on your LinkedIn. And then what you do is, what I did is I put it in AI and I said, okay, this is my resume. These are all the certifications that I have. please write me a bio for my LinkedIn. And then it put all the keywords at the top, right in the bio. So like right when they go to your page, everything's going to be right there. And it lists everything that I've done in security, which is pretty much everything. So any keyword is going to show up, and then that's going to help you there. Along with the networking, on another note, I mean, obviously going in as just an individual, if you're not with a company, and going to as many events as you can possibly go to, meeting people, making sure to add them all on LinkedIn, because you never know when you're going to say, hey, can you introduce me to such and such company or that's hiring, right? So I would say those are the two biggest things that I would suggest.
No, it's brilliant. I love it. 27 certs. That's pretty impressive too. The good thing is we're covering a lot of the things I have on other slides, which is great. Do we need semaphore? We're like, go this way.
Hi, I'm Judith. I just wanted to give like an additional recommendation based on my own experience at my company, and then also like seeing friends around me. I've had a lot of friends who come from non-traditional backgrounds, and they did exactly what you were just talking about, and what you were just talking about, because they got a job. I had a friend who worked at some, I'm not sure exactly what his company does. I think they provide some software to bigger companies, but he worked originally for them as a call support person. And he was able to make connections in the engineering department, eventually switch to DevOps. And on my experience, based on what I've seen, that's usually only possible in like small to medium-sized companies, where you can kind of be a jack of all trades and learn a lot by working with other people, because a lot of times those companies only have like 5 people doing everything. And like my company, for example, is a very, very large company, and these companies, I can switch teams, but I find it really hard because they have like 10 people for one thing, and then they have 20 people for another thing. So your role is very, very defined, and it's very hard to do work outside of it unless you completely switch teams. So for anyone looking for that type of opportunity, I would recommend looking at like startups or like just small and medium-sized companies.
Yeah, there is a lot of truth in that too. That one of the catchphrases I gave my daughter years and years ago, and we're talking like when she was really small, because she struggled with confidence, was say yes to the adventure. And that's kind of our little thing now. So like when we travel different places, when we go different things, or we're out trying stuff, or if they're like, hey, I'm like, say yes to the adventure, right? But I think in the job space, it's the same sort of thing, that I think one of the most career limiting moves we can do is go, this is not my job, right? I wasn't hired for that. I was hired for the, because you're missing that opportunity to learn something new or get to know somebody new, or you may discover that you were really good at something you had no idea you were really good at, or you were interested in. It may surprise you to realize my background's aerospace engineering. So I came out of college thinking I was going to be doing planes and stuff like that. And then in 1991, I was working for a company called the Aerospace Corporation in El Segundo, California. It's a think tank for the Air Force. President Clinton took office, cut defense spending, and I was let go. And I was actually telling somebody just the other day, like, you don't really know what intimidation is until you're sitting across the table from a 3-star general trying to defend a finite element model and that your calculations are right. And thank you for whoever on Zoom just laughed at that. I appreciate it. I heard you. So that was, yeah, that was all fun. But I actually, when I was leaving that company, right, and to your point about like other teams and unexpected things, I had a support ticket opened. And I called the company they were making the software that we used for that finite element modeling. And I said, hey, you might as well close that out, because I'm the only one who's interested in this, and they're letting me go, and no one here is going to pick it up. And the woman on the other end, her name is Mari Fujii. She goes, send me your resume. I'm like, why? I mean, that was my little reaction. I was like, I'm interested in aerospace and engineering. You guys make software, like, but I said, okay. And so I did. I got a call from them a week later, and they said, hey, would you be interested in teaching people how to use our software, like training classes? And I'd never thought about that, right? But I knew their system so well because I'd built thousands of models. I'm like, sure, I know how to do. And sure enough, I was like, okay, we'll say yes to that adventure. And I started doing that. And I was like 21-ish, 22-ish at the time. And those of you who have been consultants before, like I would make enough in a week to cover my expenses for a month. And that was a really nice work-life balance for a little while. But then one day somebody came up and they said, hey, would you be interested in regression testing? And I'm like, I have no idea what regression testing even is, but sure, why not? Because it was full time. And I got hired into their regression testing department and started just generating reports every day, running thousands of tests on their software and letting all of that automation. My job was to put it all together and make it look pretty and send it out every day and stuff like that. About 6 months into the job, to your point, I saw the job description for the job I was doing. I matched like 20% of it. Literally, like half the things they were looking for, I didn't have. And I went to them, I'm like, that, what? And they said, we knew you. Like they knew me and they knew I could learn and they knew I'd be willing to. And so that's the point I would tell those young, like you have to be out and getting to talk to people. The stuff that's on the description is just there because somebody felt like it needed to be, or an HR person put it in there, or they had a role defined and said it has these things. You've got to be able to meet folks. And we realize it's hard, but that's where a lot of that comes in. So the more they can know. Okay, before I move on,
One last question.
One last question? Okay.
Yeah, and I want to echo what you just said, because the philosophy I have kind of lived by is just say yes.
Yeah.
And figure out how to do it on the back end. And
That doesn't work for
literally,
marriage, by the way, just to let you know.
yeah. I got a job here in Austin, came in and they needed someone to do cold calling. And so I'm coming from a nuclear engineer background. I asked what that was and then started doing it. And the key is, if you're given an opportunity, they had the internet was connected to our secure, police network. And so we had to figure out what was going on. They said, who can go? I said, I will. And I grabbed a book on network
There you go.
security from Barnes and Noble, got on an airplane, and suddenly I was their security expert.
It's a long flight. It's a good thing it wasn't Dallas to Austin. All right. Cool. All right. I do want to respect time. How much were we right? Okay. I can wrap this. I will absolutely share the deck. There's a fair amount in here that we've already covered. What I do is I talk about showing up, and this is the walkthrough for my story at U of A. The one thing I would say about this one, I was looking for an excuse to visit my daughter. Full transparency, right? Go and find a DevOps related group in Tucson and see if I could go in. And what I came across was a user experience group. So they were doing, right, score, yeah, their form design. That's all they were doing, right, for the university. And I said, well, we did a speed dating session. This was so fun. We went to a bar in a hotel, and they literally had a bell. Every 2 minutes it went off, you met somebody new. And they're like, I'm in security. And they're like, why are you here? I'm like, I'm glad you asked. You don't think security has anything to do with user experience, right? It was fun, right? But this was right when GDPR was getting exciting. So after 3 months of this, of going and meeting people, they finally said, hey, we'll give you 10 minutes. And I was like, great, no problem. I asked them one question about GDPR and pointed out that they had international students. So that meant Indonesia, China, Russia, Germany, a bunch of other countries. Their data can't leave the country. And I'm like, you don't need to know what the submit button on your form is doing, but you do need to connect it to the right one, right? And all of a sudden, one guy goes, could I go to jail? And I'm like, probably not. It turned into a 90-minute session, sort of like this, right? It just sort of opened up and went in there. But it's about showing up, right? And then that led to a design thinking workshop. Then at Black Hat, I met a guy from ASU and I said, hey, we're doing all this work with Arizona. And he's like, why aren't you talking to us? And I'm like, because no one's invited me. And he's like, I'll invite you. So we started them. And so this has been the most successful one. This is my big ugly mug on the back. This was about a month or two ago because I had to do it remotely. But we'll go and we do these sessions. And one of them is an interview session called Getting the Gig, where they literally sit down and we ask them questions just if we were going to hire them, walk through how do you translate value? How do you talk about what you did? How do you take those weird experiences you've had as a cake vendor or something else and translate them into cyber, right? Because they matter, right? All that stuff. But show up. Universities are always looking for people to partner on capstone projects, on industry sessions, lectures. If it's a space you're interested in, contact the local university and just ask, like, hey, are you doing anything? There's almost always a professor who would love to have somebody do something with them. And it's just a matter of finding out who and how. By the way, ASU does everything under NDAs, and you as the vendor get to keep the intellectual property, which I also love, right? Which is a great thing. So I've also done some work with USC around veterans, stuff like that. They have a great program. If you happen to be very interested in the military and supporting, they do a thing called the MBV program. It's a 9-month program for veterans who are transitioning into civilian work. And they're always looking for capstone projects as part of that as well. These tend to be much more business acumen focused. So this is through the business school. But to your point before where you were mentioning, hey, know the business, right? Connecting security to the business and having it as an enabler, huge value add. And then Grand Canyon University is also doing a bunch of really cool stuff. They're the only ones I know, by the way, that have integrated secure coding into all of their programming classes. So, right? Which is a really good thing. And so that's what the thing I was saying is, like, when we talk about what's being taught in cyber, you don't typically find security in the programming classes, which is weird, right? We all learn to drive. When you were learning to drive, did somebody tell you all the rules of the road first, and then you kind of went out to drive and then they shut up about it? No, like you learned in context, right? You had your parents sitting next to you going, hey, watch out for that. Look over here. Don't do this, right? You learned security and driving safely while you were driving. The same should be true for coding, right? But we don't often do it too well. So that's a problem. I'm a big advocate for, hey, don't make this, sorry, I meant to go this way. Don't make this elective, but make it mandatory, right? So to your point about information security and those skills, like trying to make that mandatory for classes that involve programming. So advocate for that. Why? Because most of the development teams that are out there today admit to skipping. And then I think the last part is just helping them navigate. This is one of my favorite pictures. Professional juggler. So one of my friends in Pflugerville, this is her friend. We have permission to use this picture. But this is what I feel like a lot of the students are struggling with right now, trying to balance skills, networking, student loan debt, opportunities. And I like to point out the only way you get a picture like this is if everything is moving, right? And so they're trying to juggle all of that stuff at once. And so I'll skip my mileage on the course map because we're done, but my idea here on the course is like context with content. So when they run the LA Marathon, you can literally drill down into each intersection and know exactly how long it's closed, so you can navigate your way around the city when you need to. I think that's a really cool add-in value for stuff like that, but we need to do the same with cyber. You guys mentioned Tanya. Tanya is outstanding. Great friend, love her to death, but her books are awesome. And like I said, she would, I'm sure, be more than happy to come and talk to the students or, join remotely. She is an amazing resource. She's at RSA this week, works for SEMGREP. By the way, her courses are free at SEMGREP, completely free, and will always be. That's, so, and Alyssa Miller, if you don't know, one more. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, she was the keynote last year, if I remember right. Yeah, she's amazing. Get it if you don't get it, you get a chance to meet her, like take it. She's so worth the time. Same with Alyssa Miller. You won't find Alyssa on X as much as she used to. She's much more available on Blue Sky and Mastodon. But she's another one that is a real advocate for cyber careers, path to CISO. She's written that book, The CyberSecurity Career Guide. Highly recommend it. And then about meetup.com, obviously, and Eventbrite. And then
Oh yeah, Rob's probably going to be able to stick around if anybody has questions locally, but we do need to wrap this up. It's after 1 o'clock. So thank you all for attending. Yeah, Rob, keep going. He's good about it. And all this stuff is all great stuff. And if you all have any career questions, ask Rob or anybody here. So thanks again, Rob.
Yep.
And hopefully we'll see and hear from you all next month.
Yeah.
So
Thank
you.
you.
Great job. Thank you.
Yeah. And for all you 80s kids, you can enjoy the Breakfast Club reference.